So I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and this is a city that has violent crime at a rate 273% higher than the national average. And when a city as a whole has a violent crime rate that high, it means they have a lot of neighborhoods that have violent crime rates that are like 800% higher to get an average across the city of 273. The population here is 558,000, and like a lot of U.S. cities, it started declining after 2020. And it's 51% Hispanic, 36% white, 4% American Indian, 3% Asian, and 3% black. So they have a very diverse population here. And we're just getting into the downtown right now. The average age is 37.5. And the funny thing is that the average age of the females is 39, and the average age of the males is 36. And there's 51% females here and only 49% male. But I don't really come across that when I look at the average age. I don't really come across it where one gender is predominant over the other as far as like being older or younger. They typically just put the average age. They got a lot of people walking around down here. A lot of people just walking around, hanging out on the street. It's almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday. The average income here is $41,000, which is decent. It's a 16% poverty rate, and it says 11% of the Asians here live below the poverty line, which is rare. Now there's only a 3% Asian population, but it's rare for the Asians to be the group that has the highest level of poverty in a city. Oh, go ahead, dude. And 54% of the people that live here were born here. And it says just 5% are non-citizens, which seems low for a city in a border state, a larger city in a border state. But again, that's a stat that the person actually has to say that, yes, they are. I'm gonna actually turn here. They actually have to say, yes, that they're not a citizen. So it's possible that they just don't say that. And they're just not saying that they are or not. So far it looks relatively clean, and there's not a lot of graffiti yet. But the homicides here are rising. They had 80 in 2020 and 125 in 2022. Yep, here's a street person. Oh, sorry, dude. There's a lot of people just hanging out, sitting around, just hanging out on the street. And the murder rate here went from 14.2 in 2020 to 22.3 in 2022. And for some perspective, 22.3 is about what Chicago's at in 2023. So their murder rate here, even though they have less murders than Chicago, on a per capita, their murder rate is the exact same as Chicago. So anybody that follows this stuff knows that Chicago has a lot of homicides. They don't have the worst murder rate, but having the same murder rate as Chicago is definitely not a good sign for a city. And the assault rate here is over 1,000. And for perspective, Baltimore's at 933. So the assault rate here is higher than Baltimore. It's not as high as Detroit and Memphis. They're, up 1,700 to 2,000. They're way up there. But it's higher than Baltimore. Your odds of becoming a victim of a violent crime are 1 in 73, and overall of any crime, 1 in 17. Which is kind of typical of bad cities like this. More people just hanging out on the street. Yep, there's a lady walking very slowly with a sleeping bag wrapped around her. She doesn't look like she's going to make it through the night. She's not moving very good. And the year-over-year crime here is rising by 8%, which it's already high. So if it's going up 8% a year, that's not a good sign for the city that it's rising. They don't have a good handle on it. But so far down here, the downtown, it's clean. I don't see a lot of graffiti anywhere. If it wasn't for all the people that are just look like they might be homeless, just hanging out on the streets, or people maybe they're not homeless that are they're just hanging out on the streets. If it wasn't for that, the downtown would look, completely fine. Like you wouldn't think anything of it. The cost of living here is better than the national average. Or lower than it's cheaper here, basically, than the national average. And as far as the school test scores for kids that graduate being proficient at reading and math, Albuquerque's at 24%. So 24% of the kids that graduate are proficient at reading and math, or at grade level. New Mexico as a state is 27%. And the American average is 48%. So even in America, only half the kids are graduating being proficient at reading and math. And somehow we've accepted that as that's completely fine. But here it's only 24%. So only 1 in 4 of the kids are graduating proficient at reading and math. And we're going to go through a couple, like this area starts getting down into where it's some of the more higher violent crime rates. Basically, 85% of the people that live here have a high school diploma, which is about normal for a city like this. The violent crime in the downtown area where we just were was 271% higher than the national average. And the two areas we're going to go through are the 400% and 800%. This one we're going to go through in a second is 400%, and then the next area is 800%. It doesn't look too bad. It doesn't look too bad, but it's mostly assaults, and that doesn't necessarily, mean that the houses and stuff have to be bad. Because assaults can be domestic violence, assaults can be, pretty much anything. Yeah, because this area doesn't look too bad. This is one of the, more not as good areas of the worst ones. And as far as things like mass shootings and stuff, they might have one here a year, but they don't really have a whole lot of them. Yeah, the houses don't look bad at all. for this being one of the bad areas. This area that we just drove through, the violent crime is 400% higher than the national average. And I have to imagine that a lot of that is domestic stuff, because this area, even like this gas station here, there's no graffiti on anything. And there's still not really any litter. It's kind of pretty. They got the mountains right there. Okay, that, maybe I should have turned right there. That building on the corner looks like that might be abandoned. But it hasn't been like the downtown. It looked like the stuff was being used. The buildings were being used. It didn't look like, you know, all abandoned buildings and boarded up buildings and stuff. Just a lot of people on the street just walking around though. A lot of cars too. Even down in that area, the houses and all those buildings look nice. So this area right here, this is the area that the violent crime is 800% worse than the national average. The houses that I can see to the right don't look bad at all. So maybe we'll take a left here and see if we see anything that even looks bad. But it's different when they make buildings out of different material. Like if these houses were all wood houses that required paint jobs, you know, and then the paint is peeled because nobody's repainted it in 25 years, that's different than when you have buildings that are, well, stucco or whatever this material is, that don't require clay type material, that doesn't really require the same kind of upkeep that a wood house with paint would require. So maybe that's part of the reason some of the stuff looks better. I don't know. I'm not an expert on home exteriors. Let's just see what we can find down here. Oh. Yeah, this area doesn't look to be as bad as what it statistically is. You wouldn't get that from looking at this. I mean, that house has a whole bunch of junk piled in it and probably is an eyesore to the people that live around them, but that doesn't mean it's a bad area. I don't think this city, I'm gonna have to look. I don't think this city pops up on the weekend shootings reports. Maybe it does, but I don't think this city pops up on it. So maybe I'm thinking it's got to be. I'm just gonna cut through here. I'm thinking it's got to be. It's got to be more like domestic violence stuff and because their murder rate is high, but it's mainly their assault rate that gives the city a bad name. Bar fights, maybe. Domestic stuff. I don't know what that building looks. Yeah, the stuff doesn't look, I mean, it doesn't look too bad. And there's not a ton of, well, that might be just as I was saying, there's not a ton of abandoned buildings. We drive past one. So either I just went a bad route, which is possible. I mean, I went through a couple areas that were supposed to be bad. They're building a new building there. That's all new construction. But the city clearly at least cares a little, because I haven't seen any graffiti. There's an abandoned building on the left there. I haven't seen any graffiti, and there is very little to no garbage lying on the sides of the streets. Little to none, which is rare in any city in America these days. All of those houses on the left that we just went past, I don't know if that's just got weird paintings on it. I mean, well, the house on the left, I keep missing them with the camera. I turned to look at the one side, and then the other side's got, so there's actually on this block, there's a few abandoned houses, but not anything that's of any kind of note, really. I'm going to try a couple more blocks. Is this a one-way? Nope. Yeah, it doesn't look too bad. But the violent crime is off the charts here, and I'm assuming I just didn't hit the right areas. But the city as a whole, the downtown, is supposed to be 270, what did I say, 271% worse than the national average. And that's really high to have the whole city have that high of a number. Normally, you know, a bad city would maybe have, you know, 200 or something, and then you'll have a handful of neighborhoods that are, you know, really bad, that are bringing it down, and you got a couple good ones that balance it out. But I'm gonna sit at this light forever. All right, we'll give this one more try. The roads aren't even that bad. They're actually, I would say, of the better ones for a city, when you're in city limits anyway. I mean, there's some cracks to it, but for the most part, they're pretty good. That stuff's all closed up right there. So I guess they have parts that are closed up, not the end building. That one's got a bunch of stuff in it. They have stuff that's closed up, not a lot of it, but they do have it. And basically the only thing that I see, I mean, this stuff is all stuff on the right there where we first came around. I don't know if I caught that with the camera. Yeah, I would say, aside from all the people, the large amounts of people that are just sitting and hanging out on the streets, whether they're homeless or just people hanging out, aside from that, which that alone could be enough to increase your violent crime, because people hanging out and they don't have anything better to do, eventually they start causing trouble. And that might just be the problem here, is you got too many people with nothing to do. Because it doesn't look like a bad city, just going by looks. But, all right, well, I'm not going to keep driving around this one. There isn't too much interesting to even look at. So we'll cut it short here, and I'll let it play out for a little bit. And thanks for watching.